The river whispered against the stones, steady and eternal, as Morrow sat at the edge of the bank. Her paws traced restless circles in the water, ripples bending around the smooth curve of an egg resting in the shallows beside her. Its shell was pale, faintly gleaming whenever the light struck it, fragile and unyielding all at once. She had been watching it for days, for moons, for longer than she could count, and still it did not stir. Behind her, voices carried like low thunder. The elder circle gathered on the rise above the water, their shadows stretching long in the sinking sun. Elder Brook leaned on his driftwood staff, his frayed leaf brim dangling charms that clinked together softly. Elder Nettle's tangled vines swayed like reeds in the current, while Elder Crest stood tall and still, golden eyes sharp as river light. "It lingers," Brooke said at last, his voice calm, but threaded with curiosity. "Many eggs crack with the turn of one season. Yours resists the river's measure. Have you felt movement within, Morrow?" Morrow's amber eyes stayed fixed on the shell. "Once," she murmured. Or, "I thought I did. Since then, nothing certain." She dug her claws into the mud, jaw tight. Perhaps the river has chosen silence. Nettle's vines curled in quiet sympathy. "Late hatchings are not a known, child. The river gives its time as it will." Crest snorted, the sound sharp as striking stone. Or, "It withholds. We should be wary of omens. A delayed egg is often a troubled one. You know as well as I, Morrow, that the river teaches us by what it denies." Her body stiffened. The egg was hers, her only one. And yet, even here, even before it breathed, already it was being judged. She wanted to bare her teeth, to tell Crest to keep his fears to himself. But her voice snagged in her throat. Brooke's chuckle rolled like water over pebbles, easing the silence. "All rivers have eddies and slow turns. Perhaps this one is simply waiting for the right current." But Morrow only bent closer to the egg, as though shielding it with the arch of her body. In her chest, fear coiled tight. She could not help but wonder if Crest's warning carried truth, and if so, what would the river make of the child inside? Morrow's paws shifted, steadying the egg against the lap of water. The elder's voices faded for a moment, as her mind drifted back, not to the river's present hush, but to the storm that had birthed this fragile shell. It had been late in the flood season, the skies torn by lightning, the river swollen and furious. She remembered swimming hard against currents that felt alive, hungry as if the water itself wanted to drag her under. Her body had ached for rest, but she carried the fragile warmth inside her, protecting it as best she could. When at last the rains broke and the river slackened, she'd come ashore, half drowned, trembling on the stones. It was then she realized the river had spared her, and within days the egg had come. Not a clutch, not the 2 or 3 some mothers bore, just one, small, unassuming, and pale as river light. She had braced herself for whispers, but River Glint always whispered. Strange how the river gave her one when others had more. Strange how the shell shone faint in the dark. Strange how long it had lasted unbroken. She could still feel that first night she laid it, the raw panic that something so small could be hers. The other mothers in River Glint had gathered close, congratulating, offering food, sharing stories. Morrow had only nodded, too exhausted to speak, too dazed to believe it. Her mind circled the old tales, omens of single eggs, warnings of imbalance, of currents split in unnatural ways. She had pressed her body around the egg, shielding it from the river breeze. She remembered whispering, "Don't listen. Don't carry their weight. Just breathe, little one. Just live." Now, moons later, she was still waiting for the breath to come. The elder's presence dragged her back. Brooke's staff clicked against the stone. Nettle's vines stirred. Crest's eyes gleamed. "The river spared me once," Morrow said quietly, surprising herself with the sharpness in her voice. "If it chose to give me this egg, then I will not call it a mistake, even if it takes its time." Crest's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Brooke gave a small hum, thoughtful as though her words were another story to add to his endless river of tales. Morrow lowered her muzzle toward the shell, brushing it with her whiskers. Her amber eyes softened, though fear still shadowed their edges. "Please," she thought, a whisper only the river and the egg could hear. "When you are ready, come to me." The river air had turned still, as if listening. Morrow's words hung there, caught between the rush of water and the slow, patient silence of stone. Then, faintly, a sound broke the quiet, soft as a pebble shifting beneath the current. Morrow froze. The egg trembled. It was the barest flutter at first, a quiver that could have been her own paw pressing too hard. But then it came again, stronger, the pale shell rocking gently in its bed of river water. Nettle's vines stirred in a low, odd motion. "It moves," she breathed. Elder Brooke's chuckle was low and warm, almost triumphant. "Ah, the current turns. The river takes its time, but it never forgets to flow." Crest's eyes narrowed, sharp gold glinting in the dusk. "Late, and now restless. We must remain vigilant. A river that floods too late still drowns the shore." Morrow ignored him, her body bent low, nose nearly pressed to the egg. The vibration passed into her whiskers, her chest, until it seemed her own heartbeat in rhythm with the stirring inside. Fear clawed at her. Fear of what would emerge, of what the elders would say, of what the river demanded of her. Yet, over it all rose a trembling thread of hope. Cracks spidered faintly across the shell, glinting like silver veins beneath the light. Morrow's amber eyes widened, her breath catching. "At last," she whispered, hardly aware she had spoken. The elders leaned closer in their different ways. Brooke with a hum of reverence, Nettle with her vines curling as if to cradle, Crest with stiff suspicion. Another tremor shook the egg, harder now. A hairline fissure split across the top, and a sliver of pale glow flickered through. Morrow's paws pressed into the mud. She wanted to pull the egg to her chest, to hide it from every watching eye. But the river had given it to her, beneath storm, and now the river would bear witness to its breaking. The shell shifted again. A muffled sound echoed from within. A second crack split alongside the first, the glow brightening. Two shadows seemed to press against the walls of the shell. Brooke's voice was hushed, almost like a prayer. Not one, but two currents, bound together in a single channel. Morrow's blood ran cold. The myths rushed back with the weight of floodwater. Two from one. Twin currents. Never still. The shell broke open, and light spilled into the river's dusk. The shell burst with a soft crack, fragments sliding into the shallows like pale petals. Morrow's breath caught as two small shapes spilled out together, slick with river water and trembling against one another. One was pale as moonlit foam, fur so washed of color it seemed almost white, faintly gleaming where the water clung. The other was dark as river stone, shadow pooling in his soaked coat until even the dusk seemed lighter around him. Both sets of tiny paws scrabbled instinctively, both sets of eyes squeezed tight against the light. A single egg, and yet 2 lives. Morrow's heart lurched painfully, caught between wonder and dread. She leaned closer, shielding them with her body. Her amber eyes softened at the fragile squeaks that rose from the hatchlings, their muzzles pressed close together, as if neither could bear to be apart. Nettle's vines swayed low, brushing the river's surface in awe. "Twins," she whispered, voice full of reverence. "From one shell." Brooke's laugh was soft, but it rippled through the circle like a song. The river tells old stories, and now it writes a new one. Twin currents, flowing side by side. His cloudy eyes gleamed with remembered tales. Crest's jaw was set hard. His golden gaze lingered on the hatchlings, but his words carried the weight of warning. 2 born from 1. The river has long spoken of such things, and not with joy. Balance broken, paths tangled. This is no ordinary hatching. Morrow flinched at his tone, curling her body tighter around the twins, as if to shield them from his judgment. The pale one squirmed weakly beneath her chin, letting out a high, uncertain squeak. The dark one pressed himself close to his sibling, silent but steady, as though anchoring her in place. Morrow's throat tightened. "They are mine," she said, her voice rough. "River or no river, omen or no omen, they are mine." Brooke tapped his staff lightly on the stone, his smile faint but steady. "Then let us see what story the river has placed in your care, Morrow, for it seems it has chosen you as much as them." The river's current lapped against her paws, cool and unyielding. The hatchlings stirred again, one blinking open, faint pink eyes that reflected the fading light, the other lifting his head with a gaze of deep, steady blue. They nestled together beneath her fur, 2 halves of something the river had whispered into being. Morrow bent down, pressing her nose to their damp heads. Fear coiled deep inside her, but alongside it, a fragile thread of awe. 2 voices, 1 egg, 2 lives, 1 story. And though the river murmured with old warnings, Morrow whispered to them instead, "You will not drift alone." Morrow did not wait for their judgment. With careful jaws, she gathered the hatchlings, tucking them against her chest. They were still damp and shivering, their tiny bodies pressed close to one another, but their breaths were steady. She dipped her head once toward the elders, more instinct than respect, then turned and padded toward the hollow she called home. Her tail trailed low, and though her ears caught the murmurs of river glint, her steps never faltered. When she was gone, silence held the riverbank for a long moment. Only the rush of the water filled the air. Then, Elder Crest spoke first, voice clipped like stone striking stone. "This will divide the village if we let it. 2 born of 1. This is what the old tales warned us of. The twin currents are not a blessing. They are a test." His golden eyes burned, fixed on the path Morrow had taken. I will not see River Glint swept away because we refuse to listen. Elder Nettle's vines stirred, a soft rustle that carried calm. You speak as though children are curses before they have even drawn breath. They are only that, children. If the river entrusted them to us, then perhaps it is not a test of fear, but of compassion. Brooke tapped his staff slightly on the stones, each sound like a raindrop in the hush. His voice was warm, but his words curled in riddles. The river remembers every story it has ever told. Some say the twin currents clash until both are broken. Others say they guide each other, weaving channels no one else could follow. Which tale the river wishes to tell this time? His cloudy eyes gleamed with something unreadable. We will not know until it is sung. Crest let out a sharp breath. Stories do not keep the waters from rising. Vigilance does. And hearts keep us from drowning in that vigilance, Nettle countered softly, her vines braiding and unbraiding with thought. Would you make them outcasts before they can walk? What lesson would that teach River Glint? Fear alone cannot be our law. Brooke's chuckle was low, almost like the current itself. Perhaps the river delights in this. It binds us to question, to wonder, to guard against stone-hard certainty. For certainty cracks easier than eggshells. Crest's eyes narrowed, but he said no more. The three stood together at the river's edge, watching the ripples Morrow's paws had left behind. The dusk had deepened, stars flickering faintly above the dark sweep of water. The currents have split, Brooke murmured at last, and yet they run side by side. Nettle's vines curled closer around her, as though in prayer. Then let us walk beside them, as long as we are able. Crest's silence was the only answer, as unyielding as stone. Morrow's den was little more than a hollow beneath the roots of a leaning willow, but it was dry, close, and hers. She set the hatchlings down gently on the bed of moss she had gathered moons ago, never certain if she would need it. Now, at last, it cradled life. The pale one, so faint she seemed woven from mist, let out a thin squeak and wriggled until she found her brother, the dark one, quiet but steady, pressed back against her side, their breaths sinking as though they had never been meant to part. Morrow lowered herself beside them, curling her body to form a wall between her children and the world outside. Her amber eyes softened, catching the faint shimmer of their damp fur. She brushed her nose over their heads, the scent of new life mingling with the earth and willow sap. The mitts pressed heavy on her shoulders. Crest's words echoed like stones in the current. A test. A warning. Balance broken. But, as she watched them, tiny muzzles nestled together, she felt something stronger than fear. A fragile thread of defiance. They will not be your omen, she whispered, her voice low, meant for no ears but theirs. They are mine, and I will not let the river take them from me. The hatchlings stirred at her warmth, one releasing a faint, breathy chirp, the other resting his head on her paw, as if it were the only shore he knew. Morrow closed her eyes, exhaustion and fear knotting in her chest, but her tail curved protectively around them all the same. Outside, the river moved on. Inside, in the quiet hollow, two tiny currents had begun their flow.